The sign above the shop read, Murphy's General Store, in faded red letters, the paint peeling like old skin. Inside, the shelves sagged under the weight of canned goods, dusty trinkets, and dreams that had long since lost their shine. Tom Murphy, a man whose broad shoulders seemed to carry the weight of the world, stood behind the counter, staring at a ledger that might as well have been a death certificate. The numbers didn't lie. The store, his father's pride and joy, was bleeding out. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and the till was as empty as the streets of Willow Creek at midnight. Outside, the autumn wind howled, rattling the shop's single-pane windows. Tom glanced up, his hazel eyes catching the silhouette of a man huddled against the brick wall across the street. The guy was a fixture in town, like the cracked pavement or the flickering street lamp. Most folks called him Hobo Joe, though Tom doubted that was his real name. His beard was a tangle of gray and brown, his coat a patchwork of stains and tears. He clutched a cardboard sign that read, "Will work for food." Tom had seen him there for months, maybe years, but never really saw him until now. The bell above the door jingled, snapping Tom out of his thoughts. Mrs. Callahan, one of his last loyal customers, shuffled in, her cane tapping the worn linoleum. "Tom, you got any of that chamomile tea left?" she asked, her voice like crinkled paper. "Back shelf, near the soups," Tom said, forcing a smile. As she wandered off, he glanced at the ledger again. $200 in the bank. $3,000 owed to the landlord. The math wasn't mateing. He'd already let go of his part-time cashier, Jenny, last month. Now it was just him, the shop, and a sinking feeling that this was the end. Mrs. Callahan returned with the tea and a sympathetic frown. "You look tired, Tom. Don't let this place eat you alive." "Too late for that," he muttered, ringing her up. She patted his hand and left, the bell jingling her exit. The silence that followed was heavier than the ledger's numbers. Tom's gaze drifted back to the man across the street. Joe was hunched over, trying to light a cigarette but with a match that kept flickering out. Something stirred in Tom's chest, pity, maybe, or desperation. He didn't know why, but he grabbed his coat, flipped the "Be Back Soon" sign on the door, and stepped into the biting cold. "Hey," Tom called, crossing the street. The man looked up, his eyes wary, like a dog that's been kicked too many times. "You really mean that?" Tom nodded at the cardboard sign. Joe's voice was gravelly, like he hadn't spoken in days. "Depends on the work. And the food." Tom hesitated. This was crazy. He couldn't afford to pay himself, let alone some stranger. But the shop was drowning, and he was out of ideas. "I need help at my store. Cleaning, stocking, whatever you can do. I can't pay much, but I've got a cot in the back and leftovers from the deli case. You in?" Joe studied him, eyes narrowing. "Why me? You don't even know my name." Tom shrugged, feeling the absurdity of it all. "I'm Tom Murphy, and I'm guessing you're not really Joe." The man's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Elliot. Elliot Kane." He stuck out a gloved hand, and Tom shook it, surprised by the firmness of his grip. "All right, Elliot. Let's see what you've got." The first day was awkward. Elliot moved like he was afraid to touch anything, his hands hovering over boxes of cereal as if they might break. Tom showed him how to sweep the floors, restock the shelves, and scrub the grime off the front windows. Elliot didn't say much, but he worked hard, his movements deliberate, like he was proving something to himself. By noon, the store looked better than it had in months. Tom handed him a turkey sandwich from the deli case, and Elliot ate it in silence, sitting on a crate in the stockroom. "You done this before?" Tom asked, leaning against the doorframe. Elliot chewed slowly, then nodded. "Used to work at a hardware store in Akron. Long time ago." "What happened?" Elliot's eyes darkened. "Life happened." He didn't elaborate, and Tom didn't push. Some stories, you could tell, were better left buried. Over the next week, Elliot became a quiet fixture in the store. He showed up at dawn, swept the floors, fixed a wobbly shelf without being asked, and even started chatting with customers. Old Mr. Peterson, who usually grumbled about everything, laughed at something Elliot said about fishing lures. Mrs. Callahan brought him a pair of wool socks, saying, "You can't work in those ratty boots all winter." For the first time in years, the store felt alive. But the ledger didn't care about clean floors or warm socks. Tom stayed up late, crunching numbers, calling suppliers to beg for extensions, and dodging calls from the landlord. One night, he caught Elliot watching him from the stockroom doorway. "You're in trouble, aren't you?" Elliot said, his voice low. Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "Yeah, big trouble." Elliot nodded, like he'd seen this movie before. "You're not the only one fighting to keep something alive." Tom looked at him, curious. "What are you fighting for?" Elliot hesitated, then pulled a crumpled photo from his coat pocket. It showed a young girl, maybe 10, with braids and a gap-toothed smile. My daughter, Lily. Haven't seen her in 8 years. Her mom took her to Chicago after. Things fell apart. Tom's throat tightened. He wanted to ask more, but the pain in Elliot's eyes was a wall he didn't know how to climb. Instead, he said, we'll figure this out. Both of us. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday. Tom was behind the counter, counting pennies, literally, when a man in a slick suit walked in. He introduced himself as Derek Voss, a real estate developer with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm buying up properties in Willow Creek, Voss said, sliding a business card across the counter. Your store's in a prime spot. I'll pay you enough to clear your debts and start fresh. Tom's stomach churned. The offer was tempting, too tempting. This store's been in my family for 3 generations, he said. It's not just a building. Voss shrugged. Family's nice, but it doesn't pay the bills. Think it over. He left the card and walked out, leaving a chill in the air. That night, Tom sat with Elliot in the stockroom, a bottle of cheap whiskey between them. I can't sell, Tom said, more to himself than to Elliot. My dad built this place from nothing. He'd roll over in his grave. Elliot took a sip, wincing at the burn. You're not your dad, Tom. You don't owe him your life. Tom stared at the bottle, the weight of his father's memory pressing down. What would you do if it was you? Elliot leaned back, his eyes distant. I lost everything that mattered. House, job, family. If I had a chance to hold on to something real, I'd fight like hell. The words stuck with Tom. The next morning, he tore up Voss's card and threw himself into saving the store. He and Elliot brainstormed ideas. A clearance sale, a community event, anything to draw a crowd. Elliot suggested a pay-what-you-can day, where customers could name their price for select items. Tom was skeptical, but Elliot's quiet conviction won him over. The event was a gamble. They posted flyers around town, and Elliot even convinced a local radio station to mention it. On the day of the sale, Tom opened the store with a knot in his stomach. By noon, the place was packed. Neighbors, strangers, even kids with piggy banks showed up, tossing dollars and coins into a jar. Mrs. Callahan bought a bag of flour for $10, saying, it's worth it to keep this place open. A teenager paid a quarter for a candy bar, grinning like he'd won the lottery. By the end of the day, they'd made enough to cover half the rent. But it wasn't just the money. The store buzzed with laughter, stories, and a sense of community Tom hadn't felt since his dad was alive. Elliot worked the crowd like a pro, joking with customers and slipping extra cookies to kids. For the first time, Tom saw him smile, a real smile, not the guarded twitch from before. The real shock came a week later. Tom was restocking canned peaches when a woman walked in, her face pale and her hands trembling. She was in her 30s, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that darted nervously. Is Elliot here? She asked. Tom's heart skipped. Yeah, he's in the back. You know him. She nodded, biting her lip. I'm Sarah, his wife. Tom froze, then called for Elliot. When he emerged from the stockroom, his face went slack, like he'd seen a ghost. Sarah, he whispered. She didn't move, just stood there, clutching her purse. Lily's sick, Elliot. Leukemia. We need you. The air seemed to leave the room. Elliot's knees buckled, and Tom grabbed a stool, guiding him to sit. Sarah explained, their daughter, now 16, was in a Chicago hospital. The treatments were expensive, and Sarah was drowning in bills. She tracked Elliot down through a mutual friend who'd seen him in Willow Creek. I didn't know where else to turn, Sarah said, tears spilling over. I know things ended badly, but Lily keeps asking for you. Elliot's hand shook as he pulled out the crumpled photo. She's still my girl, he said, voice breaking. I'll do anything. Tom didn't hesitate. He grabbed the cash box from the counter and emptied it into a paper bag, every dollar from the sale, plus what little was left in the till. Take it, he said, pressing it into Sarah's hands. For Lily. Sarah stared at him, stunned. This is your money. Your store. Doesn't matter, Tom said. Family's more important. Elliot looked at him, eyes red. Tom, you can't. You'll lose everything. Tom shook his head. I've been holding on to this place like it's my whole life. But it's just a building. You've got a daughter who needs you. Go. Elliot stood, pulling Tom into a rough hug. I'll pay you back. Somehow. You already have, Tom said, clapping his shoulder. Elliot left with Sarah that night, headed for Chicago. The store felt emptier without him, but Tom didn't regret his choice. He worked harder than ever, scraping by with odd jobs and small sales. Word of his kindness spread, and the community rallied. Customers started coming back, bringing friends, sharing stories of the shop that gave everything to help a stranger. By spring, Tom had paid off the rent and hired a new cashier, a kid from the local high school with a knack for numbers. Months later, a letter arrived, postmarked Chicago. Inside was a photo of Elliot, Sarah, and a smiling teenage girl with a shaved head, her eyes bright despite the hospital gown. A note in Elliot's scrawl read, "Lily's in remission. We're a family again. Thanks to you. You didn't just save my daughter, you saved me." Tom tacked the photo above the counter, next to a picture of his dad. The store wasn't just a building anymore. It was a testament to what happens when you bet on kindness, even when the odds are stacked against you. And in Willow Creek, that was a story worth telling.